Welcome to episode 16 of Amplified Marriage. Today we are talking about, can people change? Welcome to another fantastic episode of Amplified Marriage. My name is Brian.
My name's Natalie.
So glad that you can join us wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Grab a coffee, have a seat, put on your headphones. Today we're going to talk about, can people change?
Nah, I'm just kidding. Yes.
Wow.
Yes, they can.
That would have just, like, the whole episode would have been shot right there. Like, no, we don't believe that they can.
Bye.
Yeah. See you later. We do believe that people can change.
Yes, and we are
living proof.
I think living proof.
Yeah, absolutely. You've heard some of our story if you listen to our podcast. If not, I would encourage you to go back and listen.
Actually, that's one of the things that we should actually dive into, sort of what went wrong right after we got married. That'll be another podcast.
That's a good idea.
Where we actually go into our story of what went wrong instead of giving you little snippets.
Good thought. Good
Yep.
thought. That actually would be a really good episode. Do we really want to rehash all of that stuff?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know.
For other people's benefit, because you know what? When we were going through those challenges and those difficulties, we felt like we were the only ones
Yeah, that's right.
that were going through it.
No other church people, no other church.
No one was talking about relational issues, and if there was, it always boiled down to,
You don't love Jesus enough.
right, or you're not having enough sex. Like those two there seem to be the two topics that...
That's right, yeah. Oddly enough. So, well, back to our regular scheduled programming. We do believe that people can change.
Absolutely.
I think there's this assumption that, especially in marriages, we'll say especially in marriages, because even in our case, that we're going to kiss and make up, and all of a sudden you're going to snap your fingers, and all of a sudden life is different, and it was a magic abracadabra, and your spouse is different. And
yeah, that's disappointing when you're faced with the reality that that's not really,
yeah,
not
100%. And then the thing is that you're trying to snap your fingers to well established, well built over time, well reinforced bad patterns.
Yes,
in some cases.
That's true. And well, in my case, I was trying to wave the magic wand to change you.
Yeah.
And was incredibly frustrated when you wouldn't change, but it had nothing to do with the fact that I needed to change. It needed to start with me.
Well, and even if we think back to it, we hear all the time, you hear in movies that people get hurt and you see the relationships fail or the marriages fail, or someone pulls the same shenanigans that they always have done, and they always say in the movies, people can't change. And that's actually kind of what tweaked us to this particular topic is people can't change. And
I am who I am.
I am who I am, and I'm never going to change, which I think is malarkey.
Yeah.
See, good word use. Yeah.
There you go.
Malarkey. I heard this actually from my mother. She actually is reading a book by Mike Ashcroft, and it's called My One Word. And it says this: change is possible, but focus is required. If you want to change of any kind, change really is possible.
Yep.
But you really have to focus, and you really have to put effort into doing what you need to do to change.
That's right. And focus on what you contribute to the situation, or you contribute to the falling apart, because it's rarely one-sided.
Absolutely. And there's a little story that we found on John Gottman's website. He's a really famous and well-regarded marriage counselor, him and his wife. And they said, there's a little story, said, Billy and Mary are both waiting for the other person to change. And it said, Billy says this: I've been miserable for years. I've asked Mary to give me my space, but things don't appear to be changing. It feels like I can't breathe. Billy has some friends over every weekend, Mary says. He doesn't consider my needs, and I feel so alone.
Oh.
And something that we've heard all through our times that we've coached couples over the last few years is that he's not the man or the woman that I married.
Yep. I said that.
Yeah. You said it like immediately after the honeymoon or on said honeymoon.
And we'll dive deeper into that topic when we actually go into our story. But he's not the man I married. Oh,
that's a good one.
And that is such a good one.
Some of the ones that, another one is she didn't change, or he didn't change and I did.
Exactly. And I think again, you have to both want the relationship to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to work if it's one-sided. I mean, one will grow
Right.
and the other won't necessarily. and then, right. Like you're not any better if you're both not wanting it to work and you're both not choosing to grow in your own, of like taking responsibility for your issues.
Yeah.
But growing together.
Yeah.
With both that same goal.
Yeah.
In mind. I hope that makes sense.
Which leads to the next one. There's the no fault version of why it's not working is we grew apart.
Right. Which is that's just sloughing it off. It's just sweeping it under the rug. We just grew apart. No, people just don't grow apart. It takes effort to not communicate.
Oh man, especially if you're living in the same house.
It takes effort to communicate well, but it also requires energy to choose not to communicate. Yeah. Again, it's a choice, right?
So much work to ignore the other person in the house.
It is.
Yeah. And
especially when they want to talk to you.
Yeah, right. And there's something else is that we do realize that people can change when they really feel like people can change when they feel like they're accepted or they're loved or liked or cared for.
Yeah.
But when people are feeling the pressure of your spouse and you're insulting them or you're criticizing them, the feedback is never positive feedback.
No.
More unlikely that when they're under that kind of pressure, they're not going to change because you're not telling them what they can do better. You're pounding into them that they're terrible at what they're doing.
Like, remember, it's not a business transaction.
Right. It's covenant.
And so if I'm constantly nitpicking you and nagging you for every little thing that you do wrong, that's not going to facilitate a healthy, vulnerable environment where you're going to be more apt to hearing my concerns and being like, I had no idea that I do that, or that you felt like that when I say that, or that you felt like that when I do that. If you've not created that healthy, a safe space in order to have those conversations where, I've affirmed you, or whenever you're critiquing, there's the sandwich effect that we've done in ministry where, you start off with
man, you're
good
really
things
good at this.
And positive things, and then you kind of go into the issue maybe, and then you end on a positive note, right? And I think the same thing works. Like if you're coming at me from sort of that approach, I'm more apt to wanting to hear you out.
Well, and it'll still sting. But if you're doing it in with the attitude of I'm right and you're wrong, people tend to just they feel like they're under attack or under siege, and they hide themselves.
Yes, and I think too, over the years, my approach to you
sure changed.
But at the beginning, though, I think like you just dug your heels in and you fought back in attitude.
Yeah.
And the more that you pushed back, the more stubborn I got. And so it was like, we were like two bulls. Neither one was going to give
any ground whatsoever.
Any ground, right? And we were just at a standstill.
You're so stubborn.
Yes, I do have moments.
And here's something that's just as a side thing. Instead of criticizing your spouse all the time, or enforcing them to change, or blaming them for everything, maybe you should remind yourself of all the reasons why you appreciate them, or why you fell in love with them, or why they make you smile, and actually go to them and share that with them.
That's right. Don't wait 12 years. It took me 12
Please
years
don't wait 12
into
years.
the night. Well, I think it was 12 years. It was between 10 and 12 years before I had an epiphany about that in my own marriage. And I wish that I would have maybe listened to the Holy Spirit earlier than that, because I'm sure he was speaking about my part to play in sort of why we were communicating so poorly.
Yeah.
Please don't wait 12 years. And if you're at that mark, then there's still time for
and reach out and ask for help.
Yeah.
Reach out to us, and we would love to be able to walk you through that and coach you through that. We've been there. It's not easy, and we'd love to be able to help you.
Right. Like, ladies, I just want to shout out, there's Club 31 Ministries and Proverbs 31 Ministries that they've got blogs. They have YouTube videos. They are on Instagram. It's just an incredible ministry for women on how to love our husbands well.
That's right.
So Lisa Jacobson, she is the Club 31 Women wife, and her content has been absolutely influential in helping me come out of that rut and really looking at my spouse with new eyes.
Absolutely. I remember that. Vulnerability and intimacy go hand in hand. And I just want to kind of go back to the story of Billy and Mary. What they didn't really realize in that moment is they weren't arguing about the time that they were spending together, is that they were not expressing their needs in a non-blameful way. So instead of just like coming to each other and saying, this is how I'm feeling and this is what's going on, they were never making space. They're never talking about it. They're never communicating. When they did, it was like, hey, you're doing this wrong, and they were blaming each other. They never discussed what quality time actually meant, or what alone time or time together actually meant.
Exactly. I remember in our early years, you being the more social, you absolutely being the more social of the two of us.
In general.
Would always want to have people over. And I could never surprise you by a romantic night in or whatever, because I could never be sure that you were coming home without Craig or other friends or things like that, where you were gaming or whatever it was that you were. And
the truth is I was doing that to hide having to spend that quality time with you, because all we did was fight.
What?
Yeah.
Well, this is news to me.
I'm
just kidding.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of an epiphany as to why I was doing that. At the time, I don't know that I was thinking about that. I'm like, if someone's there, she'll be nice, and we won't fight.
Right. Except that when someone's there, then I'm in my room on my own.
You weren't always in your room, but yeah, the majority of the time,
I was in my room.
We were turtling and we didn't want to have to spend time with each other.
Exactly.
Oh man. And the real truth is here's just a few things that we learned along the way. We're talking about change, and not trying to change your spouse.
No. And I think that was like the bulls that, what is that?
Banging up against each other. They're just,
came from that whole thing of like, I was so frustrated with, why aren't you changing? And then I would say or do things in order to modify, or hope that you would get the hint,
right,
and modify the behavior. Except that we don't want our spouses to modify their behavior. We want there to be a true heart transformation, right?
You can, and here's the truth. There's many times in our relationship that I was able to modify said behavior.
That's right.
for bursts.
Yeah.
And then you go back to it, and then there was no forgiveness from you.
Yeah.
And then we just ended up falling back into the same pattern. So maybe it takes you 2 months if you're that kind of person, or 3 months, or 6 months, or a year. But if it's not a true heart transformation, and you're doing it out of a place of love and respect and honor and integrity, and you're doing it just to make the other person shut up, you're never going to change permanently. And the truth is, sometimes we make a change and it just sticks.
Yeah.
Like that can happen.
Yeah.
It's less frequent and it's not as obvious, and that may not, but oftentimes, if you're just doing a change for the sake of getting them off your back, it's not because you want to, it's because you want them to stop badgering you, or stop talking, or just leave me be.
And that's not healthy.
No.
If you're wanting to avoid a confrontation because you're tired of it sort of going in circles.
Right.
At some point, you're going to have to own the feeling behind it and have that awkward conversation, as difficult as it might be. Because the more that you keep sweeping it under the rug, it's just going to grow.
Yeah.
And it's going to turn into something that you probably never intended it to turn into because it's undealt with.
Yeah. And all that to say is that change really starts with you.
Yeah.
If you're looking at your partner and blaming them for everything without actually examining your own motives, or sometimes people just need to learn EQ, emotional quotient. Like how much EQ do you have? Like sometimes they're just not feeling that, or not doing any self-examination. They're not looking back. They're just blaming the other person. And from a man who's coached a lot of marriages, we've coached some really tough marriages over the years. I can tell you a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times this is a man's response to his wife. Mm-hmm. If we can think back to some of the relationships that we've coached.
Yes.
I did the same thing. I blamed it all on Natalie. And I will tell you, some of the hardest relationships to help bring back to a unity and harmony are the ones in particular where he says he wants to change. And I actually believe that he does. Mm-hmm. But he is so in the pattern of blaming the spouse for absolutely everything, even if she wasn't even present for that situation.
Yep.
She did something to me 3 weeks ago and I communicated this way because of that. And they're holding on to this thing and they're blaming the other person.
That's right.
And for those kind of guys, I have so little patience now. I have to be direct and tell them you need to man up, go straight, go hard, figure out your stuff, figure out why you can't take responsibility for your actions. Stop blaming your parents or stop blaming your dog from 5 years ago, but step up and do the right thing by your wife so you can make that change.
And if it means seeking out professionals, then do it.
Then seek professionals.
Right? So
just before you go on the other side of that is that those particular types of guys never want to seek other people's help because they think that what they're doing is A-okay.
That's right. Yes, because, let's just get down to it. No one wants to be wrong.
Ever.
Change requires work.
Oh, boy.
Change requires a sort of being honest with oneself.
Uh-huh.
Where am I going wrong? Is it in my thoughts? Is it in my words? Is it an idea? Is it my past? Is it baggage that I've not? Is it trauma from my childhood? There are multiple layers of why we find ourselves in the situation that we're in.
Right.
So whatever it is, there has to be an owning or recognizing where it started.
Yeah.
And if you need a counselor to help you process those kinds of issues to determine what the root is, then do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's worth it. It's priceless. I'm better for it.
Yeah.
Because I sought out counseling to help me process.
And the thing is if you say with your mouth, men, you say with your mouth, you say, I value my marriage. Mm-hmm. But by your actions, you refuse to do anything that shows your wife, and by your actions refuse to do anything that actually shows them that you value the marriage.
Right.
They see through your facade so fast.
Oh, absolutely. And then, we've seen this too, where, we've lived it too, so the pattern has been in just a negative pattern after negative pattern. And then the one time that you demonstrated that things were different.
I wanted a gold star.
And you wanted a gold star, and I was like, and I think I even said as much, like, what you want a round of applause for. Ooh, you stepped up in this way, like,
big man. Woohoo!
That's one time. And so there had been some trust issues.
Yeah.
Right. You set a pattern for me not to be able to trust that you would follow through with your word. And then you would get angry with me when I didn't validate or affirm your progress.
Yeah.
Except that's what it takes. It's not just an instantaneous, all of a sudden now we just eliminate the last, in our case, 2.5 years, and we just start from square one. Like, there's a lot of things that we had to work through. It takes time.
Yeah.
And it takes effort, on both parts.
And part of this is that blame makes you feel like you're good in those moments, but it does lead to long-term resentment and long-term anger.
Yep.
Just like we're not snapping our fingers and the marriage is better, what you're doing is by setting proper communication in place, you're setting up systems and habits that build your relationship so you can deal with those issues, and resentment and anger aren't the permanent setting of your relationship.
Exactly. And it's creating a safe space for you to come to me if you're, now we're at that place where you can come to me and it's a safe place where I'm not just going to like tear you apart.
Yeah.
And vice versa. And then we've created the safe environment for our kids now.
Yeah.
Where they see that, mom and dad are going to freak out about every little thing, even though my face might look like I will in the moment, but really making a conscious effort to not respond in a way that will force them to, what's the word, like, go inward.
Yeah. Just look inwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. And conflict is good. Good conflict, good healthy conflict, good proper healthy, non-critical, non-blaming, problem-solving conflict is not bad.
That's right. And I think it's important for your kids to see you resolve conflicts in a healthy way.
And here's just a few things that you can do to help you and your spouse to change yourself before you try and change your spouse.
Yep.
And number one is...
be a better spouse.
Dun, dun, duh.
Right? Take the high road.
This isn't one of those things like, maybe it is. Maybe I'm going to say it. Work harder and suck less. Right? Is it one of those things, you taking responsibility for your actions, for your behavior, for your tone of voice, for the way you responded in anger? That's you being a better spouse.
Right. Because we'll just go with 12 years because I'm pretty sure it was the 12-year mark of just kind of like holding you responsible
for everything.
For, even though I might not have articulated it verbally, I certainly felt it and thought it.
Yeah, 100%.
In my heart and in my mind, and it was embedded there. And it wasn't until I had a revelation about my own self where I really started to see a change, an actual physical change.
So what you're saying is that when you took responsibility for your actions in our relationship, things changed for the relationship.
That's right. And it took a huge load of humble pie for me to come to that place in my own heart where I was being honest with myself and how nasty I had been in my words towards you, where it was non-honoring and it was not esteeming you as my husband and who God created you to be.
Right.
It wasn't. It was a double-edged sword that was, two sides. The double edge was poisonous, and it was not life-giving at all. But it took that huge moment where I needed to apologize.
Right.
After that, I noticed a change in my own heart toward you.
Yeah. And then, and in this same vein, there's a Dr. Harriet Lerner says in her marriage rules book, if you don't change your part in a stuck pattern, no change will ever occur.
Hallelujah.
Good
Dr.
word,
Lerner.
Dr. Harriet. Well said.
Absolutely.
Number 2, focus on the issues at hand. And I would love Natalie to explain this one.
Well, when we were talking about this, ultimately the goal is if as life is going on and we're going on through our day, if there's a situation that arises, to deal with it in a prompt manner, whether it be a misunderstanding or an unmet expectation or just, I don't know, you irritated me for whatever reason, to be able to say, hey, it really bothers me, or I feel unheard, or whatever the dialogue might be in that specific moment, so that we can deal with it and then problem solve together and then move on.
That's good.
Rather than, the real issue at hand was 6 months ago and a lot of things have compiled in 6 months, and then I just lose my cool over the fact that you didn't fill up the car with gas. Well, the issue wasn't really that. Do you know what I mean? Like it was
6 months of things you never communicated about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
focus on the issues as they come up.
That's right.
And don't sweep them under the rug.
No. And it's your spouse. And if you're having trouble communicating, then that's something that maybe you two need to sit down and talk about. Hey, I feel like we're not on the same page. We're not really communicating, I feel, in a healthy manner. And how can we help this?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And make it a joint effort.
That's really good. Yeah. Number 3 is you hear about, we've said it all the way.
Take responsibility.
Take responsibility for your actions. We are responsible for our words and our actions. Period. Stop.
End of discussion.
End of discussion.
We are not responsible for how other people receive that, but we are absolutely responsible to make sure that we're not delivering our woes in a nasty way. Like, we are responsible.
There's a way to deliver.
There's a way to deliver.
Just like the Bible says, when you're gonna communicate an issue, you do things in love.
That's right.
There's a way to communicate.
And in the
problem.
moment, I might have to take 20 minutes to gather my thoughts so that I'm in that headspace where I'm not just going to say the first thing that comes out of my mouth, because 99.99% of the time it's not kind. And
you are not the friendliest when we're in a
no, and I know that about myself.
Discussion.
So, I mean, knowing your spouse, where, you know, Brian knows that if I'm really upset, probably not a good idea to poke the bear in that moment.
I have done so.
You have done so, and it's not gone well. Right. And so, I mean, I'm still responsible I chose to respond as such, right? I didn't have to. I could have chosen not to.
Yep.
Again, I'm responsible for what comes out of my mouth.
You can't, I don't ever understand when I hear people say, oh, they made me so angry, I lost it, and violence happened.
No.
Like, I understand being pushed, and I think we're talking about that's a different thing. Where if there's an addiction or there's abuse and a physical abuse, or
you need to get help.
Then seek help and get out.
Absolutely.
We're going to keep saying that until the end of time. I'm talking about her pushing me so far, and I lost my cool. I didn't exhibit self-control.
No,
I didn't, and so I did something wrong, and I sinned towards her by responding in violence or a push or a shove or using my size to intimidate her. That's on me because I lost self-control.
Right. And let the record show he has never, ever, ever been physically violent. Ever.
She scares me.
I think the whole Edmonton thing, we'll get into that when we talk about our story, where you tried to...
I just was like puffed up like a bird. I'm like, I'm going to...
Yes, and then I laughed out loud. But we'll get into that in a different... That's for next time's podcast. Apologizing to your spouse means that you're taking responsibility for the problem, even if it's just a small amount of the problem. Not generalizing hey, I'm sorry for whatever I did last week.
Right.
That's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
And that's not going to change the situation. That's just like, oh, I did my duty and let's move on, because I don't really want to get to the nitty gritty of what actually happened.
And actually have to talk about the feelings and the emotions and all the stuff that happened.
Be specific.
Yep.
Hey, I'm sorry that I called you a dumbhead, or whatever, it might be.
You're so insulting.
I'm being
tame.
Right? I'm sorry that I name called. That was really immature of me. And you cannot take words back. That's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can apologize for them in the most heartfelt way, but words hurt and words cut deep. So I would rather look at you and choose in the moment to take, 10, 15 minutes and have, go for a walk or something like that, so that my words coming out of my mouth towards you can be life-giving.
And our next one is complain without blame. A criticism attacks the core of a person, while a complaint focuses on very specific thing about the other that you do not like.
Right. Focuses on a behavior.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've done both.
Yep,
in
absolutely.
our 19 years. I feel like we've tried the criticism route, and it never really got us anywhere other than further in a rut.
Yeah.
And I think as we've sort of focused, we made the decision to stay together. Mm-hmm. And we made the decision that whatever it cost, and there's a cost in your pride. There might be a financial cost with like getting marriage counseling and things like that, but what is it worth?
Right. 100%.
And so to me, it was priceless how choosing a better way.
Give your partner the benefit of the doubt. And consider that maybe consider guys and girls, maybe consider that your spouse is doing the very best that they can in that moment.
That's right.
And that maybe at that time, they don't know what they don't know. They maybe just not know, and they're learning how to be better at what they're doing.
That's right. And getting upset about a specific pattern of behavior, if you've never articulated, hey, that really hurts. It really hurts. How are they going to know?
Yeah.
And then how does that facilitate a healthy place for one to change?
Absolutely.
If you're holding things over their head that they have no idea.
Right. Wow.
They're holding on to. So can change happen? Yes, we are living proof. Change can happen, but it takes a personal ownership.
Absolutely. And here, just as a quick going back, is that be a better spouse. You can be a better spouse. You take your responsibility for your actions. Focus on the issues. Don't bring up stuff that happened 6 months ago that you didn't communicate with your spouse in an argument that's happening at the present.
Yep.
Take responsibility for your actions and complain without blame. We can work things out just by not criticizing the other person's personal character about who they are, but attack the actual issue.
That's right. And that whole complain without blame, for every negative comment
That's right.
that I say to my spouse or that you say to your spouse requires 7 positive comments to counter that one negative.
Absolutely.
So
we've got a lot of work to do.
Think on that.
We got a lot of work to do. Well, everyone, if you like our podcast, it means a lot to us when you share it. You let people know about Amplified Marriage. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Again, you hear us say this every time. If there's a topic, if there's a question, or anything you would like for us to discuss, please email us or communicate through Instagram or Facebook. And you can email us at amplifiedmarriage@gmail.com. And you've heard us say this before. We believe that marriage can be reset.
Yes, refreshed.
Recharged.
And restored.
Thanks for listening.
Talk to you soon.